Hello, welcome to Subjective. This is a series of interviews with contemporary fashion models to try and establish really the history of fashion photography through their eyes. If you happen to be watching via Show Studios YouTube, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe below. We're leaving Mr. Warhol behind and going to another strange man with white hair now, but not necessarily then, Ken Russell.
Mr. Russell, yeah, he didn't have white hair when I met him. So there I was, happily modelling, being very successful, travelling the world, you know, as well as New York. I went to Japan, and again, we had the same thing in Japan when I arrived, you know, actually the pictures of me arriving in Japan and me crying because I got off the plane, and as we got off the plane about, it probably wasn't that many, but it seemed like so many, like 100 Japanese photographers all running at me with cameras, screaming at me in Japanese, and I just burst into tears. And the pictures, Twiggy arrives in Tokyo, it was me crying. But anyway, I got over it, and we had an amazing time in Japan.
I'm sure.
But it was that kind of, it was that 60s British thing, which, you know, I'm a very proud Brit. I love flying the flag, so I was great. But anyway, everything was fine. I could have gone on modelling daily, probably for another 20 odd years, as the people do nowadays. And when I was 18, I got a call from a man called Ken Russell.
Right.
And I went to have lunch with him, and he said he wanted to make a film from a William Faulkner book called The Wishing Tree, which I didn't know, but he gave me a copy. Yeah. And you've got to remember, at that point, he was a big director in England.
Right,
I think Women in Love had come out.
Right, that was a huge film.
He was shooting The Devils, but he was the enfant terrible, wasn't he? British cinema. Yeah. I mean, he changed British cinema. Yeah. I mean, all his stuff he did for Omnibus on television, they were amazing. But anyway, so I knew who he was. He was very famous. And had this lunch. He gave me the book. He was going to get Paul McCartney to do the music, which is how I met Paul, and we've been lifelong friends since. Right. It never happened for whatever reason. The money wasn't, you know what it's like.
Things come and go.
You know, it didn't happen. Yeah. But I became great friends with Ken and his then lovely wife, Shirley, who's, again, neither of them are with us anymore. And he had a big house in Notting Hill Gate and 5 children. And every Friday night, they'd have film nights. Right. And Shirley would make a big pasta. Yeah. And then Ken would drop the sheet. Yeah. And he'd show kind of Busby Berkeley movies, Fred and Ginger movies. And I became captivated in this kind of, you know, because I watched films, but I didn't, you know, I wasn't, you know, we had a telly, but they didn't show films on telly. No. And Mum used to take me to the cinema occasionally, but it wasn't. So it was like a big learning curve. And then in that time, must have been 68-ish, I went to see a musical of The Boyfriend on stage. Right. And it was a revival because it was originally done in the 50s with Julie Andrews. It's what made it's what made Julie a star.
Oh, right. I didn't know.
And they had a revival in the West End. I went to see it, and it's a pastiche musical of the 1920s. Yeah. Yeah. And quite famous music in it. And I knew some of the songs. And it blew me away. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen. Yeah. The next night we were having dinner with Ken and Shirley in a restaurant. And we were just chatting. And I said, oh my God, I've been to see this musical. You've got to go and see it. It's fantastic. And Ken, who loved cheese champagne, had a few glasses. And by the end of the evening, he said, I've got a great idea. I'm going to make the film of The Boyfriend and you're going to be Polly Brown. And I just thought, he's had too much to drink. And we went home. Next day, I got a call, and he said, what do you think? I said, what? He said, about doing The Boyfriend. I said, oh, my God. I don't know. I said, you know, I can sing, but I've only sung in the choir at school, but I've never acted. He said, we'll send you off to class. Don't worry. We're going to do it. Right. And so, again, I went to dancing classes. He said, I'm not going to send you to acting classes because I don't want to change you. Right, yeah. But I went to singing lessons and dancing lessons. And a year later, we started filming The Boyfriend in 1969. Right.
So did you make a conscious decision to stop modelling, to do that?
When we started filming. Well, in the training, I eased back. I was still being booked. Yeah. But for me, this was such an exciting project. And the more I got into my learning to dance and I just loved it. It was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And when we started filming, I just thought, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So.
And what was it that you liked about it, as opposed to being a fashion model?
Well, I loved modelling as well. I was very happy doing it. But this was, I always say, it reminded me of going into the secret garden.
Right.
Because I didn't know, I didn't really have an ambition to be an actress or a singer or a model or, I was a kid.
Yeah.
So these things kind of happened to me, and I was given this wonderful, wonderful chance from various people. I mean, I owe Ken so much because, again, he opened that world to me.
Yeah.
And the world of great cinema and musical theatre and Fred and Ginger and Busby Berkeley, and it was just like, so I always call him my mentor, really.
Right.
And I could have gone on modelling, as I said, but I made the decision after the film came out. And as you know, when something like that comes out, you get other offers.
Yeah.
When The Boyfriend came out, and it did pretty well.
Got very good critical reviews.
It did. We got a few naff ones, but you always do.
Yeah.
But mainly it got good stuff. And it stood the test of time. It's a sweet film. And so I got a recording contract because it was a musical. I was singing in it. Yeah. I won 2 Golden Globe Awards, which I won Best Most Promising Newcomer and Best Musical Actress. Right. Which my mum had on her fireplace until she died, and then I've got them now. But so that was nice. And so it just was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And I thought, and I think I was right in that period. I think it's different now. Yeah. But in those days, there was always a slight stigma against model. She's a model. She's a bit thick and stupid. She's pretty, but which is rubbish, I have to say. I know a lot,
But there is a sort of difficulty that models tend to have going into film. Some do it very well and some don't.
Yeah, I know. But, people like Lauren Hutton, who was a big model. She did really well in films for a long time. Angelica Houston was quite a big model. Yeah, absolutely. Jessica Lange was... I mean, they weren't famous, but they were quite big models for a while before they changed course. So it did happen. But in this country, I felt that if I continued modelling, and because I was so famous as a model, it would kind of... I thought that I wouldn't get taken seriously in my acting and singing and performing work. Yeah. So I made the conscious decision, aged 21, that I was going to stop modelling for a bit, whatever. Yeah. And follow that course, which I did. Yeah. And I loved it. And I did my own. I did records. I had my own TV show, variety show where I had guests on, singing and dancing. I loved it. And then I went to Broadway and did 2 years on Broadway in My One and Only with Tommy, and various films. And so, I've loved all that. And then in '93, and I still do that, much less a degree, because as you get older, obviously, the parts aren't quite the same as when you're much younger. But I mean, I get offered things, but they're not really what I want to do. But I've got a couple of projects that we're trying to raise the money on. Right. But so in '93, I think it must have been, I got a call from Stephen Meisel. Yes. And he said, am I jumping stories?
You are jumping stories. I'm going to rein you back a bit.
Come here, girl.
Stephen will come. He'll have his moment. I just want to get a little bit more on The Boyfriend.
That's a lovely picture.
It's a beautiful picture, actually. I remember getting that.
Do we know who took that?
No, I don't. I'm probably
There must be a credit. I don't remember. It might be Barry Latigan,
It might be.
It's got that kind of look. Yeah. That was from the fantasy sequence, because Ken loved his fantasy sequence.
He did. He did love his fantasy.
And we were leaping around like nymphs.
And did you find it was a totally seamless kind of crossover? Because as a fashion model, you're being directed quite vocally all the time. Yeah. So people are saying, yes, that's good, no, move that. It's like a sort of constant flow of directions, I'm guessing. Yeah. But as a film, as an actress, you're having to sort of do it almost without direction. You get your pre-direction, i.e. the director will
say, you work with Ken, he was very hands-on, and I was the new girl on the block, so I was very nervous when we started. But the thing is, again, when I talk to people about my life, there are certain key people in my life that have been extremely important.
Yeah.
And without them, my career would have been very, very different. And obviously Ken is a major one.
Yeah.
Because at the time he was the biggest director in England.
Yeah.
He became my friend first.
Right.
So I loved him, and he was quite jolly and funny,
Yeah.
and we'd have hysterical times together. So I completely trusted him.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I could do it. I was very nervous, but because he had faith, and I thought in the back of my mind, well, he's the biggest director in England. He's not going to put me in something
That's not what he's doing.
Gonna not.
But you were an extra in The Devils, weren't you? Is that right?
Yeah, for half a day. He did that as a joke.
Right.
That was before we filmed The Boyfriend.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to have you come along and just walk down the aisle. I'm in dressed up like a boy, I think. I'm in with all the hair and the outfit. But so because I trusted him, I mean, I really trusted him. Also, it was such a lovely film. Oh, sorry. It was such a lovely film to make because, you know, the music's lovely and it's a pastiche. It's quite, it was very much, I love that period, that kind of, although it always made me laugh. I'm known as the girl of the 60s, which I was.
Yeah, the 1920s.
The 1920s, 30s is what was in my heart.
Yeah.
And actually, The Boyfriend, which is set in the 20s, and My One and Only, which is set in the 20s, I felt very comfortable and at home, that kind of period.
It was part of a sort of, in the 1970s, there was a sort of 1920s revival. Things like The Great Gatsby, Bonnie and Clyde.
That's right.
I remember everybody painting their bedrooms cream and brown, sort of thing. But so there was a big 1920s, with The Boyfriend, there was a big 1920s moment that happened in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
So this came out, I think, in 71, I think, was the premiere. The Boyfriend. But it was an extraordinary experience for me, and I just decided, because of the stigma against models in this country, you can't be a model and have a brain, which is
but it's also
rubbish.
Of course it is. But also there's that thing about fashion. Fashion is something that's in fashion today and out of fashion tomorrow. So being a fashion model and having a particular look which represents a particular era.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the time,
so I think I was probably very lucky because
it was a very astute move. It was a very astute move.
Yeah, in hindsight it was, but I didn't plan it. It was because I met Ken. And he gave me the opportunity, and then I figured that's what I wanted to do, and then that took me off on another, route. Very happily.
Was there no more modelling at that point? Once you sort of, was there no more modelling? Did you just stop at that point?
I made the decision. I turned down everything. I just cut it off. I didn't have time.
No.
Because after The Boyfriend, the phone was ringing. I won 2 Golden Globe Awards. So I was being offered films. I was offered a TV series. I went to America to do 1 film. So, my life completely changed.
Without being personal, who was close to you at that point? Where were you getting because everybody has somebody who sort of advises them, or husband or lover, or...
Various people.
But where was your
My mum and dad were very, they were like my, my strong roots.
Yeah.
And nobody kind of advised me at that point. I mean, I was feeling very grown up by then.
Right, yeah.
Ken became my mentor, very much so.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I had various people around me that I would discuss things.
You weren't being managed by an agent or a...
No, but there were various people that came and went.
Right, okay. But you'd see more Ken was the person who you would...
Yeah, I think he's the one I kind of owe so much to, which I've always said.
Yeah. You took some great pictures of Teds in the 1950s.
Yes.
Brilliant pictures.
Really?
Teddy girls.
Oh, how interesting.
In the sort of, Notting Hill bombed out.
Oh, wow. I didn't
because obviously one knows his films, but when he was a young man, he took fantastic pictures of Teds.
I didn't know that. You've taught me something about Ken.
Actually, his daughter sent them to him.
Victoria?
I guess, yeah.
Oh,
so.
She's a lovely lady.
And you've got daughter, granddaughter.
I've got a daughter and a granddaughter, and then my stepson has got 2 children as well. So I'm kept very busy.
Sure.
Best job of my life. Most exhausting, my God, 4-year-olds are exhausting.